Oh, okay. We twisted a touch this way, maybe. Right. Tell me when we're actually going.
You're on.
We're on? Greetings there, fellow golfers. How are you? Does it seem like we're on?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay, if you're just checking in, hopefully there's a few of you starting to come in. We'd love to hear if the sound is good. Perhaps you could, what do they put, a 1 in the comment box maybe? That tells us the sound's good. Something like that. Yep, turn the TV off. Just trying to get started, get a little flow here. I'll introduce this extraordinary gentleman to my left here in a little bit, an old friend of mine and a very good guy in the world of golf. And then the team here is going to try to put on a good show for you tonight. Hopefully help you with your golf. That's the main thing, have a little bit of fun. So I think Gary is monitoring some of the things there. If we get decent sound, if it's okay, if you'd put a 1 in there, maybe try your sound, Anthony.
Yeah, check, check. Everybody hear me fine?
So hopefully you can hear both of us.
I'm gonna back away too to make sure that it's not just coming from your mic.
We're at the Lag Shot headquarters. We're going to field golf questions for a good long while here, hopefully, if people have them. See if we can help you out a little bit. We noticing anything there in terms of... We're good. Okay,
good.
So we
Mic's
seem good
up.
for sound. So again, waiting for some people to come in. Hopefully we'll get a good share of them, but we're happy to take a few questions. Also happy to hear from where you're from. Maybe if you're, mostly it's North America, but sometimes we get Europe or once in a while Australia or something.
It's our theme.
Our theme, this is Anthony Vessecchia. Anthony helped us a lot with a lot of the scratch golf off-season training courses. One of the literally the best golf-specific fitness guys in the state of Florida. It's a big state. And Anthony, well, you work with all levels of players, injury prevention for middle and older players, but a lot of young explosive players, college players, top high school players. So just how can you produce more power and energy in your swing, that kind of a stuff, right?
Most of the time it comes from, and what we found throughout research is that most of your power is going to come from your vertical jump or your ability to create ground force. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is generating ground force, rotational velocity, in ways that you can enhance that. And then there's going to be a little bit that we're going to talk about where certain swing faults or things that you do,
Sure.
or maybe parts of your body that don't work properly that will cause you to not be able to create those.
Okay. There's always a chicken and the egg thing. Sometimes bad positions cause the player to move poorly to adjust for them. Sometimes poor movement patterns create bad looking positions. So you try to figure that out. But we want to answer your questions most importantly. And it could be, it might not be for specifically for power. It could be for injury prevention or how to just be more balanced or consistent or whatever. So as soon as we get some questions coming in, let's have one.
Fire it up.
Anthony, are you scratch?
Am I a scratch golfer? No, I am not a scratch golfer. I spend more time in the gym than I do on the course.
Some holes he's a scratch player.
Oh, I can definitely get scratch. I can scratch for 9 holes, and then I'm usually spacing out somewhere, thinking about my next workout.
He's a busy guy in the gym training golfers. Believe it or not, I don't get to play much either. I bet I get to play less than most of you out there, but I still like to grab the club, aggravate my swing, myself with my swing and work on it.
All right, I got a question.
Okay, question.
So two-stroking.
Two-stroking.
Because I'm still having an issue with my slice. Changing my grip to a more powerful grip, but I'm thinking I'm raising or twisting the wrong way or something.
Okay, so having a problem with your slice, changing your grip. The thing you'd want to change with your grip is when this is stronger, more rotated away from the target. Now you can overdo that certainly, but when your grip is more rotated away from the target, it is easier during the swing to rotate the face back the other way. And I'm telling you, the ground level, the face is open for slices. If you can get the face closed, even if you pull it, you're making progress. So relax your hand, let it fall more to the fingers. Most of the time I find when people grab it up in the palm, their hand doesn't wrap over, then they try to do this. If your hand is relaxed and there's some angle here, it should naturally cup and wrap over. Hold the club in front of you. If you're in front of the screen there, tilt it like that. Get good at that and incorporate that into your downswing. That's one other comment I would make about a lot of slicers. They try to get this club closing, but they really don't close it. They just throw it. So get good at closing it up in front of you.
Yeah, and in fitness, I found that a lot of times the slice happens from an early extension.
Yeah, body can do that a little
tight
bit.
Hamstrings, tight lats, and you're just really getting into this position. And a lot of times that's going to kill your rotational velocity. It kills the velocity of your, oh, I just hit my mic, of your torso when you're going through.
But I think you'd even still, there's no question that if you get stuck here, you can hit the slice, but a skilled player, even then, will frequently, if not typically, overroll the face and get it back square, maybe hook it. So check that grip out, see if you can get good at it.
So we got Phil in the UK.
Phil in the UK.
3 a.m. wanted to say hi.
3 a.m. Hey, Phil, how are you?
So we have Ronnie says, hi, Adam.
Hey, Ronnie.
While I'm listening. He can't actually see you, but he's listening.
Okay, Ronnie. Nice to. Hi, Ronnie.
How do you keep your head still, i.e. not swaying in the swing?
Well, I would say, and we'll let Anthony have a go, I think it's the quality of your pivot. The head is just stuck on the end of the body. If you turn too level, you'll tend to lean this way. If you extend your right side, your trail side too much, you'll go that way. So if you can pivot around your spine on the angle that's perpendicular to your spine, your axis will stay fairly still. So I think it's more about the quality of pivot than it is just trying to keep your head still.
Yeah, the head still. And I found with the 3D motion capture that I do at my facility that a lot of times, and Adam may be able to correct this exactly, but a lot of times I have people just focus a little bit more on taking the club away with their torso. And a lot of times that will help. They don't get here and they don't pull their head. And it kind of slows down the takeaway a little bit, so they're not lifting up or moving out of where they should be.
If you're struggling with that, I'm telling you, get the club out of your hand, get decent at it without the club, then maybe hands and no club, use a mirror a little bit, then get the club in there. People just grab this golf club, they get the ball underneath them, and they get so into hitting the shot, they really don't feel things. They don't have an opportunity to really make something change and figure out what they're trying to do. That's the backswing, by the way. That the downswing, we want the head pretty still, but the downswing, we would have some shift of weight as long as the head and the upper body are more in one place. Hopefully that's helpful.
Sue Stroman says, thank you very much. I've gained leaps and bounds since watching your video.
Oh, glad to, Stroking. Glad you made some progress.
Anthony, do you have a certain set of lower body exercises that we can do regularly to increase golf strength and mobility?
So lower body exercises for golf strength and mobility. What have you got?
Yeah,
Anthony?
a lot of what you want to focus on is trying to get that weight shift that we've already talked about. You want to try to be able to load more on the trail side and get used to pushing through. There's also simple things. I'm going to grab a kettlebell that you can do as well. And having a kettlebell, this is 10 pounds. If you have this, it'll a lot of times pull you to the position that you need to be at if you're using your hips first. So this is called a 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock swing with the kettlebell. I hold it with my hands down. You'll take it back and you'll force it forward using your hips. And that's how you start to generate more power through your hips and just feel that. So anytime you have something heavy in your hand, it's going to feel really uncomfortable to just do it with your upper body. You'll start to feel a lot of pull in your lower back. But if you're taking it back this way and forcing it with your hips, you'll feel more drive coming from your hips. There's also other things like lateral bounding, where you're really working on just ground force. And you would just turn with your upper body, feel that load in this trail side and pushing off. And just get used to that. Once you feel that you've done this more often and you really feel that push off that trail leg, that's when you start to grab it and rotate into your lead leg. So you would then load and feel that hard push and then clear the lead hip. And that's a couple things you can do at home that are pretty easy to just start feeling the lower body generate a little bit more. There's many other exercises, but those are just some general ones you can start with.
Basic leg exercises, squats.
Yeah, you can do squats, obviously, to strengthen. But the people that have hit it the furthest that we found over time, a lot of them had a history of basketball. And that's because of their vertical jump. They just have got really good at generating ground force. And if you're a person, say, that had hip replacements or knee replacements, you're like, well, I can't jump all the time and land, go in your pool. You can explode out of 3.5, 4 foot of water and then lift your knees up as you're coming down, and you won't get that pounding. It's the pounding, obviously, that's
here in Naples, Florida, almost everybody has a pool, so it's a good exercise here.
Or you can go to the community pool and just look completely foolish.
Exactly right. Yeah, you can do that.
I didn't realize that about basketball.
Yeah, basketball
Apparently,
players.
vertical jump is one of the, well, you know better than I.
One of the biggest
about
tests.
the most correlative to distance potential there is.
Mm-hmm.
Can you touch on that about how Rory extends?
Yeah.
He pretty much jumps.
Yeah, they jump.
Well, you can certainly get yourself.
Even Scotty Scheffler.
Yeah, Scheffler does that too. You can certainly turn your hips through the ball faster if you're pushing up as you do it. If you're stuck to the ground swinging the club, you're just not going to get the sort of explosive sort of movement as when you tuck those glutes up
It's the
underneath
same, like
you.
I have a history of kickboxing and boxing, and everything that we've done, you see people throwing punches, it all actually starts from the ground. So if I want to throw sidearm, you know, you're going to do that. If I want to punch somebody in the belly, I'm going to go this way with my hips to get more power. So it's a lot of those same movements, and you're still always driving into that lead leg and then lifting out of it.
And these things will really create power more effectively, obviously, if there's some separation between what the arms and club and shoulders are doing from what the hips are doing. If everything's moving too much together, you're just not going to get that much effect.
I got a
out
really
of it.
fun drill with the kettlebell for that too, with
Okay.
some disassociation. I'll show you that maybe in a moment.
Okay.
So, actually, I was just going to ask. He's asking also about mobility.
Mobility?
So is there mobility you can tie into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times people lose power because they have that early extension that I spoke about earlier. It just drains your power, because if your hips are taking time to move this way, they're not taking time to get to the target and actually generate rotational velocity. So you really want to make sure that your hamstrings are very flexible, that you can touch the ground. You want to make sure that your lats are very flexible so that, you know, you have good shoulder flexion, so that you can keep your hands high or behind you while your hips are moving. Because one thing that a lot of people don't realize is your lats attach right here to the back of your arm. They'll run all the way down your side, hook the fascia, and that attaches to the back of your hip. So if your hip is moving and you're not flexible here, your arm will drop. So now you've taken away all the larger muscles that are actually going to generate power to get you through, and it's going to kill also some of your transition sequence as well. You may not lead, you know, hip. If your arms are dropping, then they got ahead of your torso. So now you're taking away some of that width.
Now, this might be of interest to you. Anthony's, amongst other accomplishments, is what they call a level 3 TPI fitness guy. I'm a level 1, which is, you want a level 3 if you can get one. Believe me, that's what you want. So TPI is Titleist Performance Institute. A lot of research and money has gone into this, and it's accessible to people, I know, certainly all over North America, but if you go to visit mytpi.com, and you can see where specialists are in your area. Put your zip code in, look for someone that's a level 2, preferably a level 3. You might get fitness trainers like Anthony, some golf pros, some health professionals, but this program is terrific, and there's all kinds of exercises for specific issues on their website. Once you've plugged in, you've had an assessment. So you can get access to some really good trainers if you go to mytpi.com, put your zip code in.
Yeah, it's definitely, you want to do that. You want to get assessed. We always say if you don't assess, it's just a guess. So you may not actually figure out what it is in your swing or in your physical being that's causing your issues.
Very simple and fairly short assessment. Go to one of their professionals. Within 15 minutes, they'll assess you and really send you in the right direction.
Good stuff. How about some exercises to tilt, turn, and rotate easier?
Tilt, turn, and rotate easier. Yeah, there's a few. You want to hold this for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So tilt and turn. Tilt, turn.
The tilt, I mean, it depends on the, you know, what are you hitting, a driver, or are you hitting an iron? I mean, that's going to obviously change where you're at. But could you hold this for me, Lo?
Sure.
This is one that I like to do. Could you hold it about at your knee level?
Okay.
I'm not going to pull hard. You won't feel much. I like this one here for getting the hips. I call this the cable hip drive. I usually hook to a cable or a band. You take the band and you put it in front of you, and you reach behind you with your arm that is closest to the anchor point. And from here, you just push against that band and rotate. And this is something that'll start to build strength and rotational velocity through your hips. I like this one. There's another one called drives. If you can hold that high for me. You hold a band or something here, pin this to your sternum. I'll make sure I don't hit that mic. And I call these drives. Your hand will be this way because you know, you're going to hold the club with your trail hand this way, but for the sake of this exercise, I don't want you to hurt a rotator cuff this way and try to pull. That's too much weight on that shoulder. So we go this way so it'll incorporate more of the chest, pec major, so you don't get any tears. And you'll hold it this way here, and you just drive through. And you make sure that as you're doing this, you're leading that whole movement with your hips. As you do that, you'll find that it's so much easier to get through. But this is one that'll get you used to getting your hands and kind of that whip and that punch through impact. So those are two real quick ones that I like to use a lot.
Is there anything different about adding driver club head speed compared to what we just talked about? Some guy was asking about driver club
club head speed versus the irons. I mean, It's a longer, lighter club. The club head's farther from your body, so I think
leverage,
it's basically that creates more speed, and certainly through the ball, you're trying to swing a little more up and explode upwards to get a little different angle of attack. But I would say most of the speed is related to the length and weight of the club.
Yeah, and what you'll see too that I found with a lot of people that are hitting a driver, I don't see many people when they're hitting their irons actually leaving the ground that often. With the drivers, you tend to see people leaving the ground a lot more, especially lighter people, like some of the girls on the LPGA tour, younger females in general. You'll almost actually see them jump.
I haven't left the ground for a while now, Anthony, so not hitting the ball very far
I'm slowly
either.
going down that road too myself, but don't worry.
Remember to repeat the question.
Yeah, okay.
Peter. Peter from Vancouver Island. I'm having a problem keeping the club head square through the impact area. He's shutting the face before he gets to the end of the divot coming out.
Okay, so Peter from Vancouver Island saying he's actually overshutting the face. It's almost shut coming out of the divot.
By the time he gets to the end of the divot, it's already closed.
It's really close. Well, I'm telling you, first off, I mean, ultimately the judge is the golf ball, Peter. So if you're not hooking it too much, I wouldn't be that concerned. I'm guessing you are. So if you're overhooking it, i.e. the club face is getting too close, almost always the golfer is too frozen through the ball, there's too much resistance, and the hands get too active. What you're going to need is to hit some punch shots where you can explode a bit with your hips and finish a little bit more like this on a short 50, 60-yard punch. In other words, you've got to slow that release down. Most people, it's a little bit different. But if you're not hooking it, let me tell you, these great players on TV, by the time their hands are there, that hand's all the way rolled under here. You want some energy in the golf club. One other possible thing, if you are hooking it and the face is getting closed, a lot of times the handle is too far back, so they get too much of this look. It is very easy to hit it left when you do that. You can close it a lot if you can keep the grip end of the club forward and keep your hips forward. That's really the best combination.
Two-stroke is asking, it's a little off topic, but what's a good drill for putting? Is there any good tips for reading greens more active?
Two-stroke wants to know drill for putting, reading greens. I think first off, if you go to the Scratch Golf Academy app, two-stroke, in the tools section, the little crossed golf clubs down in almost in the right-hand corner, there's a green reading trainer. Has a whole video on how to look at greens and read greens. It also has a leveler that'll give you some idea of the degree of slope and what's a lot. There's a lot of content there. I would do that, but learn to read the green a little bit and see what the course designer is doing. It is not nearly as complicated as you might think. So I'm going to refer you to the Scratch Golf Academy app. In terms of putting drills, to me, one of the most foundational things with putting, this is a 7-iron, is the setup, and it's foundational because unless it's a super long putt, there's a very small amount of movement in a putt. So the habits you create at address are very hard to overcome in such a short amount of time. So generally speaking, club more in line with the forearms, grips in the palm. This one shot, we actually bend the arms a little bit so the arms get snug and stable, and the bent arms facilitate us getting more bent over. So if you're nice and straight there, a little crimped here, and you're bent over the ball a bit, you're well on your way, at least let's say that.
Can you show some examples of how to crack the whip using arms or wrists? Which is better?
How to crack the whip using arms or wrists, which is better? Well, we'll let you comment on this too, but basically you're trying to create energy. They measure 4 segments, and he's the expert here. Hips, upper thoracic trunk, arms, club, bat, racket, whatever you're throwing with. And you want to get the energy from your core out to the object you're trying to throw or hit with. So you would lead with your hips there, was what you want to do. Next, your body would start to get pulled, and you can see how the club actually has some bounce and some load in it, and it's the reverse sequence coming in. You have to begin to stabilize so that energy cracks out there to the golf club. And I find people that don't get enough pop in the thing, sometimes the grip's at issue or whatever. Number one, they don't load enough, and number two, they don't decelerate enough to snap the whip enough.
Yeah, and it's a lot X-factor stretch was something we talk about. Go ahead and set up again and go to the back. Go ahead, all the way back. Now start your downswing. The X-factor stretch is how long can you keep your back to the target while you're pulling your hips through. That's going to allow a lot more whip as well. I have an issue of gripping way too hard. So I sometimes don't release the club. So that's also a thing too, grip pressure, like as he said, depending on your
So you're going to find the quicker you can move a segment and then the quicker you can decelerate it, the more energy you'll create. Slow drifting patterns don't create the kind of pop and whip you need.
Yeah, we used to talk about if you had someone standing below and someone standing on their shoulders and then another person on top of their shoulders, if you were to jump and you just kept moving, they wouldn't be able to jump off as high, the next person up. But if you went up and stopped really quick, you're going to add that spring, and then the next one does it, and then it explodes. So like say with 3D motion, PGA averages are, you know, anything from like, we'll say 450 degrees per second with the hip. Then it jumps up 1.5 times to, you know, 750 or something like that. So yeah, about 650 to 700, and then it pops up again, you know, with your lead arm, another to 1,000, and then after that, it's all the way up to 1700 degrees per second with your hands. So
the energy's cracking.
You want to get that energy to jump from segment to segment about 1.5 times.
Okay, great.
1.5 to 2.
No questions, sir.
No questions right now?
So ask people that ask.
All right, so let's whack a ball or two here. Anthony, tell me what I could work on to create a little bit more balance or speed or something like that. Let's have some questions if you have them there, folks. Happy to try to help you there. I didn't like that swing too much, a little rushed, but. So what I'm working on here is trying to feel, for me, I tend to get too wide going back, so trying to feel a nice stretch here without getting my arms too stiff. And then again, get my upper trunk more forward. I tend to stay back a little bit with my upper trunk and pick the ball a little bit, but that's just my tendencies. I'm not saying that's for most people. Any other questions here popping in? We're happy to do what we can to help you a little bit. Let's try another one here. There's the stretch I need to feel right there.
Iron dynamic loft.
Lower iron. Do you mean like a lofted club, like a wedge or? Well, dynamic loft just means impact loft, basically. You have a dress loft and you have impact loft. You want to de-loft the club on an iron, give or take about 2 clubs worth. If you doubt that, or if you want to have an example of that, put a club, I've got a glove on here where the shaft is vertical. You may not be able to see that, but the leading edge of that club is at least 1/4 of an inch off my hand. That is because they're anticipating it will be like this at impact, which gets it level. You put that on your own hand and you'll see that. Why is that important? Number one, it tilts the sweet spot against the ball. Number two, you can apply pressure more when the hands are forward. And number three, if you can hit the golf ball with the shaft forward, you'll bottom out beyond impact, beyond the golf ball. You'll hit the turf beyond the golf ball when you do that. So in order to get that, there's several factors. Certainly, Anthony's been talking about driving the hips. You've got to drive the hands past the ball. But when your hands get past it, you've got to be able to tilt the face in towards the golf ball. That's what you've got to do. You get this wrist lofted through the ball, not such a good look. Just try to use the club so that you can literally make some little practice swings. And without hitting way down, use the front edge of the club a little bit more. Cut the turf like that. You'll have the general idea. I see some stuff coming up on the screen. See how I'm doing that? I'm just tilting that front edge against the turf like that. Hit some little pitches like that, be great. Anything else popping up for us there, Gary?
Yeah. It's hard to make contact while working on rotating more. Shall I engage my core more?
It's hard to make contact while
working on rotating.
Oh, working on rotation.
Engaging his core more.
If you're too stiff, you won't be fluid. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. There's a fine line. I would say if you're set up and you're kind of in an S posture, you know, this way, then yeah, you may want to do a small tilt to get a more neutral spine to start with. And that just frees you up to be able to rotate easier. I mean, it's a lot harder to rotate if you're rounded like this. You can't rotate, and it's a lot harder to rotate if you're in an S posture. So a lot of times I say it really depends on your setup. Look at your setup in a mirror. You know, look down target line in a mirror to see how you're set up. And if you have to do a small pelvic tilt, right, you know, a posterior tilt this way to straighten out your spine, that will allow you to free up and move. But I wouldn't say to be like that. I mean, you don't want to be fully tense. You want to be pretty relaxed, but a small little tick here and there is pretty good. You want to usually be we use the numbers is like about 20-degree tilt in your pelvis at impact. So for that, it does help people to rotate a little cleaner.
Just a very general tip for golfers. I've given golf lessons pretty much full time for 35 years. Look at me. You can tell I've seen a few bad golf swings and I've made a few bad ones as well. As a general rule, people have an amazing giftedness with tools and objects, the way we use the mind and the body. Most things you do in everyday life, you don't think about you think about the shovel or the door handle or the pen or whatever it is. So when you work on these body things, work on them, but start to associate it back with what am I trying to get the club to do more of or less of, more down, more up, more from the inside, whatever it is. It'll become much more instinctive. I think sometimes when people work on their body motion, just watching golfers, they get so into what they're doing, they've completely lost track of the sense of the goal of it, which is to deliver the club a certain way. So bear that in mind. I think it'll help you.
And sometimes they just get too quick.
Can be.
Way too quick in your transition. Your timing's off because you're trying to fire your hips so fast.
I'm going to share with you guys one of the best tips I ever heard from one of my favorite coaches, but in a few minutes. It will stand you in good stead in your golf life, I promise you, but not just yet. Okay?
So what kind of good stretches recommend flexibility?
Stretches for flexibility.
Best stretches.
This is the man.
Over 50 years old that can instantly start to help in their golf.
Yeah, so most people worked office jobs. Yeah, so the 3 best stretches that I'll show you the 3 best stretches that I like. I need to find something for one of them that I like to do for golfers that, you know, that help with their swing, help with injury prevention, so on and so forth for golf. One is if you have anything that you can use, which I'm looking around for, I don't have a foam roller, but if you have a foam roller of any kind, I'm going to grab the slant board for this drill. Do we have anything? Anything at all that I can put right here?
How about this?
Anything at all that I can put right here. That's a little small, but
small.
For demonstration purposes, it's fine. So if you have a towel, anything roll up or a pillow on your couch or anything like that, you would just want to squeeze something between your legs here so that you can, all you're trying to do is make your adductor muscles here tighten up, and that'll start to help with some movement in your hips so that your hamstrings will relax a little bit. So these are toe touches. So just pretend I have something right here squeezed really tight, and you'll do 10 toe touches with your toes up. Once you do 10 with your toes up, you'll turn around and you'll do 10 with your heels up. After you finish that, I like to do what's called a reverse toe touch. So you're going to put your hands under your shoes and you're going to stand 10 times. After this one, if you have any blood pressure issue or anything like that, stand up nice and slow so you don't lose your balance, okay? So that's one for the hamstrings. Another one that I really like to do is a prayer stretch. So if you don't have knee replacements or any issues in your lower body and you can be in this position, you want to make sure that you're sitting back all the way on your heels, and you can get a stability ball, a chair, or anything like that, and you're going to put your hands up on it, and you want to lower your body this way. You want to make sure you stay back here so that we keep a posterior tilt in your hips so that you're getting a full stretch. Because if I arch my back, I'm shortening the muscle here. So we want to make sure we're turned this way, hands up, and stretch. Now, if you have a problem being on your knees for this stretch, this is called a prayer stretch. You can sit in a chair and just find anything that's higher than that chair. You could put the stability ball up on the table in the kitchen, sit in the chair, and put your hands up on it and lean over that way so that you're getting a full stretch here. That's a really good one. The other one I also like to do is a cross body stretch. So if you can grab anything, I'm going to use Adam. Come over here, Adam.
Right.
If you can use anything to grab on right here, you can take your arm, put it over, and you drop down. Now that gives you a nice cross body stretch here. You can see it from this angle. You'll see that big stretch. That just helps you keep the club back a little bit longer so you don't get your hands dropping and start flipping the club. Those are 3 that I like to do a lot of, because those are the main ones I see that people have issues with that cause you to slow down your swing because your sequencing just gets thrown off. So I like those.
We're going to be coming out with some golf-specific drills here in the near future. You could tell them about, stay tuned because Body Practice Inc. is going to be coming out with golf fitness videos in the near future.
Yeah, we do have a release coming out of a few free things that we're going to be giving away to help with all your speed training, speed creation, injury prevention, and then we're going to have some programs, obviously, that'll be of the paid variety, but we're going to have a really good list of free stuff coming out to everybody.
Inc., right?
Yeah, and I think we're going to send it out, I do believe,
to the list.
To the list. So you guys will be getting a lot of the free stuff. Just stay tuned, and we'll have a lot of good content coming out for you.
Yeah,
It goes way more
Okay.
in depth.
I'm going to give you that tip I was given that's one of the best I've ever heard in a couple of minutes here. I'm not trying to be a pain in the neck. I'll just string you along a bit, though. Who we got, Gary?
Did I say about the void, the spin out?
No.
Okay, so Robert Levine
Robert Levine.
says, Adam, how do you make sure you stay behind the ball while at the same time exploding up and forward on the downswing?
Well, the question is, how do you stay behind the ball while at the same time exploding up and forward? Ultimately, what you're looking for is the top of your axis, the upper back neck, would remain relatively in one spot while you drive your hips forward like so. You want to have, what is it, 80 to 85% of your pressure there by the time you hit the ball.
At the top of your backswing here.
I mean, by the time you're at the top, you already should be moving that way, but you want to move the bottom of your body. Honestly, talking to golfers, so many of them just think it should be pure hip rotation coming down. It shouldn't. You're trying to propel the club that way. Not every great player does it the same, but you've got to drive, and once your weight's here, once you've pushed down into that shoe like that, you can push up off it and explode your hips a little bit, so it's sort of down, forward, and up a little bit.
Hold the club up again like you did to your head when you were showing it, the one straight up and down.
Yeah.
A lot of things that I look at too when I'm doing a video assessment of somebody, start your downswing with your lower half, keep going all the way to impact. And once they get to impact, I always try to look to see if this right here, straight up and down, if their head is aligned with their trail knee. And a lot of times that's how I know if their head stayed in place and didn't move. Once they get there to that impact position, you'll see their head is almost every golfer you look at, you'll see their head is directly over their trail knee. And that's how I know they just didn't move. You know, you didn't get this way, you didn't get steep on your swing, you kept it right there, and you'll find that the hip is moving, but the head isn't, and you usually find it right over the trail knee.
This is where you're getting the best of both worlds. You want explosiveness, you want athletic movement, but if your arms are connected, in case you didn't know, at your shoulders, if your upper body's moving around, your ability to manage the bottom of the swing isn't going to be that good. So if you're in one spot here, I'm not saying motionless, but in one area, and you're driving there, you're definitely going to hit the ball better. Rich Nichols.
What's to do to avoid the spin out of the waist that results in an open face and a push to the right?
Spin out of the body. So spin out and leave well, what would be happening? You'd spin out, cut across it, and leave the club face open. I think number one, well, there's a few things you could say, but number one, I see people spin with their top of their body too much and engage their shoulders and arms and wrench that out of the way. I don't usually see people able to stay more closed here and overspin their hips independently.
Yeah, and what you were just doing there, one thing that I like to look at, because I usually try to start from the ground up, when he just show the upper body move again that you just did, when they say they go with their upper body. If you notice, his knee jumped out that way.
Yeah.
His center of pressure was not moving directly at the target.
No.
So that's one thing to always kind of look at. I look at people when I'm looking at like pressure mats or, you know, my 3D stuff, I almost want to see this knee replace this knee. That's how I know you're moving straight at the target in a nice linear motion. So many times if you're spinning out, this knee is coming around. You're doing what's called a hip hike. It looks like this instead of that. So that's something you look for. And then that roll of that trail foot, very important too.
Now, a little thing, there's one of my favorite coaches. I reference him every time I ever do anything. I wonder why we don't just have him do the show, but he likes to get people with golf clubs or alignment rods. I do this at the teaching center. Without a golf ball, making 3/4 backswings, just toss the rods down the driving range. Just can you throw the object? Most people can do it reasonably well. Sometimes they hang on too long and it shoots over the shoulder. Once people don't deal with the golf ball and their target becomes there, I see a huge improvement, maybe not tour level, of the ability to move more this way, not to spin so much. I'm telling you, the movements a lot of golfers make, if they were throwing a club, they'd throw the thing behind them over there. And when the ball isn't there, they don't do it so much. So even if you take an alignment rod and just toss it 15 yards, there's a good chance you will start to get a feeling for what you want to try to get in your golf swing.
Yeah, it's like the bucket drill. Is, you know, kind of keeps you there too.
Yeah.
And skipping rocks. We all did that as a kid.
Yeah, most people would skip a rock. They get this sort of movement pretty easily.
You're not going to see them do it with their arm and go like that.
Right.
It's not
Don't let the golf ball ruin your day and bully you into making a swing directly towards it is sort of the moral of the story. Okay, here comes this is going to be a good one, I can tell.
Relapse
Relapse.
Says, I've been struggling with thinning the shots. Anything that they can do to hit the ball better and make better contact?
Relapse has been thinning the shot, struggling. There are different ways to do that, but generally what you'll find is one of a couple of things. Almost always, let's say at ground level, the bottom of the swing is happening too far back. You're catching the ball on the upstroke a little bit. These golf clubs with the loft they have are built to have forward lean at impact, not to be savagely hit down on, but to have forward lean. So one way or another, you're not getting a lot of that. What often happens with people too, their mind sense is I'm going to hit the ground behind the ball, and they pull their arms or their body up a little bit, just trying not to hit it fat. And that's what happens. So make some swings with two goals. I'm going to put a ball there.
That second one is me, Adam, just so you know. That's what I do.
He doesn't do that. He's a good player. So what I would do, make some swings where you feel like you can glide along and brush the rug or the carpet on that side of the ball without chopping down. So you've got a nice long level spot, but you can start to brush the rug there. If there was dew on the grass or something like that, you get nice marks here. On a small scale, you'll be on the right track if you can brush the ground that side of the ball. Got to be level at the bottom, not down to do it.
Ronnie is asking,
Ronnie.
do's and don'ts for consistent low point with wedges.
Do's and don'ts for consistent low points with wedges. Well, I mean, it's a pretty broad subject. It's an important one because if you can control your low point, you're probably going to be a pretty good wedge player. There's something I would call steeps and shallows that comes into these, and that is a steep is anything that's making the club go more towards the ground, and a shallow is anything that's making it brush or go up. And I think as a very broad statement, most golfers have too much steep in terms of this. The club's coming down too much, it's too much in front of them, and then when you look at them around impact, they bail out and get shallow around impact. Most great players, the club's coming down much more from the side of the body. This is much more of a brushing type of approach to the ball. And because it's coming in nice and shallow and level here, they can afford to drive in and lean the handle there. Think of it as an airplane. If it's coming in at this angle, that's a steep. You better produce a shallow when you land it, or you know what's going to happen. If you can come in more like this, you can drive it in there. So if you're having a hard time creating a nice forward bottom out point, you're probably steep and bailing out on it. I should know, my dad was in 5 plane crashes in 2 wars, so I wasn't, but he was, so.
On that note, how do you get the fastest swing speed before and after impact?
Fastest swing speed before and after impact, you really want your most speed right around impact, right?
Right at impact is when you want your peak rotational
leave it to
velocity
this
for your
lad here.
hands and the most speed. So how do you generate the most speed at first? That's going to be your trail foot, almost like a 45-degree drive towards your lead leg. So when you're there, your focus should be pushing off this one into this leg, but trying to keep your head there. So good luck. That's the fun part. If we could all just do it easily, we'd have no problem, right? But no, it's just really pushing off this trail leg, getting into this lead leg, and then from there to really get the hands close. Once you get close to impact, that last whip of power is the jump off of the lead leg. So that's that spring that just kind of helps that real quick snap through. Another thing that you'll notice a lot of guys that are on the downswing and when they're starting it, almost everybody, I'm not saying at impact their leg is straight, but at some point during that transition into impact, you'll see their leg straighten out and then it'll probably bend because they've went into their lead hip so much. But you'll see, if you watch Rory, you watch those guys, you'll see this trail leg really get straight. What's happening when you do that is, if you guys can practice this at home, just standing this way and push and clear your lead hip and push real hard and try to straighten this leg as much as you can. I'm not saying this is how you want to swing, but you'll see it happen really quick in a lot of the long hitters. What they're doing is this glute will engage tremendously by straightening this leg, because what you're doing is you're forcing an extension in your hip. And all power in anything you do, if you jump, you're going into a really strong hip extension to be able to explode hard. That happens in any sport, even baseball. If they're swinging, a lot of hip extension. They're just 50-50 instead of like 80 over here and 20 back. There's tons of hip extension, and that is one of your biggest components of power. So if you have weak glutes, you're just probably never really going to hit it far unless you got a lot of mass that you can put behind the ball. So you really want to focus on glute strength. That is the king of the golf swing. So if you feel this, or you feel that trail glute really tighten, you know you're getting good power through the ball and through impact.
Just a couple of thoughts for you guys and gals there. 2 practice thoughts. Number 1, which is what we're doing right here. Take the time. Great players, elite players do this all the time. Most players never do it. Away from the golf course, away from the ball, with or without a club. With is great. A sliding glass door mirror is great. But just take the time to move around and discover a few things. What do I feel? What makes this happen? Play around with it without the pressure of trying to hit the ball. And another thing, at the golf course or otherwise, don't always try to do it correctly. Do it differently to what you do it, and then find your way to the middle. Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you're bottoming out here, make some swings where you bottom out way over there. I move too much, that's okay. Move around, and then you'll find the middle. Don't get stuck always trying to do 0%. Now, I said a little while ago I would give you a little gem. You may disagree with me that this is that fantastic, but I'm telling you it is. I was told by a great instructor one time, me and a few other guys, he said, look, we're talking about swing thoughts. How much is appropriate? Your conscious mind's active, telling you what to do. And he said, look, if at any point in the golf swing, when you're really trying to hit a shot, your conscious mind is in a different place from where the swing's actually happening, you're in some trouble. You've got conscious mind. And you know, when he said, this is about 10 years ago I heard that, and when he said that, deep down, I didn't have the guts to say it out loud. I thought, I'm always in a different place. Every time I get to anywhere in the swing, I'm thinking about what I've got to do next. This is years ago. What a relief when I heard that. So I'm telling you, you can work on stuff and experience things once you practice it a bit as it's happening. That's what you want. If you're here and you're thinking about what you've got to do at the top of the backswing, and then when you're here, you're thinking about impact, you are not going to have much rhythm and flow. You're not unlocking the genius of the brain when you do that. So just some tips there for you. Let's take a swing or two. Do you want to stand there, Anthony? Unless you really trust me.
I'll catch it.
Yeah. Max.
Practice swing's always good.
No expectation.
2 things. Number 1, there's no. Okay, Max, why are practice swings always good? There's some truth to that. And the thing that isn't necessarily true is you don't have to find the ball, you don't know whether the face was square, et cetera, et cetera. But what you generally find is better is just the general flow and the balance and the way your body feels. And I think it goes back to what we were saying a minute ago. Most times when the ball's not there, it doesn't mean we don't have some intention in our practice swing. But our conscious mind relaxes, we go with it a little bit. We have an intention, but we flow. And then the ball gets there and we get stuck, we stare at it and we try to do everything right. And once that conscious mind's active and interfering, the balance, the fine coordination of the swing drops. So you've got to kind of let go a little bit and let it flow a bit, I think, if you're going to get the same feel. But I bet you'd be surprised how poorly sometimes you might have actually squared the face with a practice swing. Anthony is asking, the older he gets, the tighter his hamstrings get. Okay, this would be for Anthony. Exercises to stretch the hamstrings. Robert's got tight hamstrings. What's good exercises
earlier?
For that?
I did show the toe touch drills. Those are a lot of my favorite because they're an active stretch. They're not static. Static stretching, actually, if you do that before you do anything athletic, we found that it will drop anywhere up to 20% of your strength in that muscle. Really? So I wouldn't sit there and do your stretches like this and hold it and then go out and start hitting golf balls. That's not a good idea. Okay. You're about to do something dynamic, so you want to do ballistic stretching. But there are some reasons why the hamstrings tighten. So I want to get to that real quick first before I just start showing you stretches. Your hamstrings will usually become tight when your glutes are very weak. And the reason being, if you're in a hip hinge, the main primary mover to get you out of that should be your glutes tightening to get you into extension, okay? If they're very weak, your body's gonna stop you from getting low because they know that your hamstrings, which are the secondary mover for that, are gonna try to do most of the work for you. And that's how you pull something. Also, if you have lower back injuries, your hamstrings will tend to tighten too because they don't want you in this position. So until you've built up your core and built up your glutes, your hamstrings aren't usually gonna loosen. But so by doing the drill,
you're saying they're sort of compensators instinctively.
Your brain is protecting you,
okay,
protecting injury or protecting you because your glutes just do not work properly. So
interesting.
When I give someone a bridge test or we do something like that and they have problems with the bridge, I won't even really tell them to stretch their hamstrings. I'll say, let's get to work on your glutes first. Because if I start stretching out your hamstrings, you're going to be able to get in positions you may not, your body isn't ready to protect to get you out of. So I'd be careful. But Hamstring stretches, you know, a lot of them that I use with a lot of people are simple ones, you know, just you can kind of hold the club and just kick through this way. That's a dynamic stretch, and you're just getting your body to move through that hamstring. You know, you're going to keep trying to get in this position, and you're here. So well, if you're here, you're actually in a hamstring stretch. You're trying to reach down and touch your opposite knee.
You'd be holding the club this way, just
yeah, and I would hold it more this
like
way so it doesn't slip. Yeah.
Right.
And you can just do this and try to kick. And obviously the higher you kick, but I wouldn't go with a real high one at first. You could pull your hamstrings. So start really gentle, just like you would if you're going out to warm up and you don't want to do a proper warm up and your warm up is swinging wedges first and then working your way up to a higher club. Same thing here. Start real little and then you can start to let the foot kick back so you can get a quad stretch while you're doing it and then slowly get it a little bit higher. That's when you can do it on the range. It's not going to make you look foolish. You know, some of the drills they got you out there doing like pelvic tilts and stuff, you just look silly. So, but that's a quick one that you can do when you're out on the range.
Before you go play. Yeah, you know, you've overdone it.
So you can. That's a simple one you can do out on the range. But there's so many, and again, we're going to be releasing so many for you guys. A lot of free stuff coming up too. So
great. Let's take a swing. Okay, another question.
Really struggling to get in the rough with longer irons. Phil, can't get out of the rough with long irons.
Okay, Phil, here's a word of it. It's talking about getting out of the rough with longer irons. It depends a lot how thick and how long it is. But once it's at least the height of the golf ball, don't be going at it with longer irons. It is too difficult to hit them. I mean, I think once the grass is as high as the top of the ball, I wouldn't use anything much more than a 7 or an 8 iron. And there's really two reasons for that. Number one, if that thing's down in there, you have to hit a little more down and pinch it a little bit more. Now, contrary to popular belief, rough aside, the more you hit down, it doesn't make it go up, it makes it go lower, right? So when you start chopping down into the rough, you're driving the ball lower. And then guess what? If it's in the rough, you need to get it up out of the rough. You don't need it going through that stuff and slowing down. So you start using a long iron there, there's just no way you're going to be able to make that work. Even tour players, when you go to the US Open or somewhere where they have especially long rough, they're not hitting 5 woods and 4 hybrids out of that rough. They're hitting 7, 8 irons and just trying to get it out there and get it rolling and bouncing. So hit down, use loft, and get the ball up out of the grass, you'll be okay. Quick anecdote for you. Remember Phil Mickelson lost the US Open at Winged Foot with a double bogey on the last hole? Was it 2007, something like that? Probably most people remember that. An old friend of mine's dad was the director of golf at Winged Foot for 30 years, a former tour player. So Phil had called him about 2 weeks before the Open, said, can I come out and play a practice round? Because nobody knows the course better than you do. This guy played the tour in his younger days. So his son asked him, and I was getting the information, how was the practice round with Phil at a couple of weeks before the US Open? He said it was great. We had 18 holes. Phil was a lot of fun. We had lunch, talked about some different things. He said the pro said the thing that was most impressive with Phil that day, now they grow that rough high for the Open, especially before the tournament, because they can always cut it down a little bit. He said how far he could carry the ball out of that thick stuff was unbelievable. He was hitting shots, 200 in the air out of that crap. It's just not your normal guy on a golf course, Phil Mickelson, by the way. So just an anecdote about hitting it out of the rough. But unless you've got the lag and clubhead speed and coordination of Phil Mickelson, don't try to hit anything longer than a 7 iron.
You got a lot of questions.
Okay?
All right. Can you use your right hand as your dominant hand in golf?
Absolutely. Can you use your right hand? Most right-handed golfers, I'm right-handed, are right-handed. There's some exceptions certainly on both sides of the ball. Should you use it? This has always been a puzzling thing to me. So many times people come for golf and say, well, I just can't control my right hand. Is there any other part of your life where you have no control over your right hand? Do you go to the breakfast table and throw stuff all across the table? You don't. Your right hand is not an enemy. Ben Hogan used to say he wished he had 2 right hands. What happens with people, they try to bulldoze the ball and they get steep and things like that. But if you've got good sequence and good flow and you've got the club in a good spot, hey, that dominant hand can really help you lash the thing. I think it's a blessing, not a curse, if you can time it.
Can you explain Lynn Howell?
Lynn Howell.
Explain the 50-second rule. When does the time start?
The 50-second rule, that would be, I'm guessing a little bit here, but I think that's the allotted time to hit the shot. And I think that the clock starts, so to speak, from when it's your turn to play, not from when you've decided you're ready to play. So once the person's hitting, it's your turn. If I'm reading you right, you got 50 seconds to do it. Generally, they're not going to time you, but if a group, what happens if a group on the tour falls out of place, there's an open hole in front of them, they'll come out and they'll start timing shots, and that's the sort of thing they'll time. Collies Anderson.
I got into a bad habit of hitting the ball with my irons. What can I do to help? I've got a bad habit of hitting the ball with my irons.
Bad habit hitting the ball with your irons. It doesn't say specifically what can you do to help.
Is that associated with body tightness?
It's difficult to say without seeing you hit, but here's a little rule of thumb for people. When you're struggling, I don't play video games, that may shock you, but I know some people that do, and here's apparently how they work. I'm told, you play the same game an expert plays, but you play it really slowly. Everyone tries to kill you at a very slow speed, and as you prove you can shoot people, whatever it is you're doing, and get better, the game speeds up. Now you need more dexterity. Same with any skill. So if you're struggling, do it smaller or slower. Can you start to create the kind of movement patterns or contact at some level like that, and start to get the kind of angle of attack and the bottom out point? When you can, add some size and speed, and if you struggle at that, go back to the small level and build your way up. People just don't do that. It's always got to be full speed, always crashing it. It's just hard to progress when you do that. So slower and smaller till you get the right feel.
So, Isaac is asking,
Isaac.
tips for going from a practice swing to a real swing.
Tips to going from a practice swing to a real swing. I mean, I think, listen, a couple of things, Isaac. Different people are different. There's some people on the tour that are much more technical. Justin Rose will go through things like this and even exaggerate certain things. He likes to work on his swing, even when he's out there playing. I'm not saying he's bogged down when he's actually hitting the ball. Other players are a little bit more, and Ernie Els back in his heyday, that guy didn't have a swing thought in 20 years on the tour. So you've got to go with your style a little bit. So do what helps you in the practice swing. I'm more like, other than performance, I'm more like Justin Rose. That is to say, it gives me confidence to just rehearse the things I want to feel a bit before I go in there. But for me, certainly it should be a goal for anyone. I try once I get in there to just have a good mental picture and go, but it helps me to rehearse it. So that kind of practice swing could be helpful for you. If you're more of a, well, let's say an Ernie Els type, just a kind of an image sort of player, probably Phil Mickelson was my guess. Hey, make a swing all the way, full speed, that you feel like gives you the sort of swing and shot shape you like, and take that to the golf ball. There's no exact recipe for doing it. Do what fits your personality style. Do you have a thought on that?
No.
No? Okay, so it's unanimous. One man says that, and we're going with it.
Robert is asking,
Robert.
Anthony, what is the best pre-shot stretch routine before I go to the first tee?
Ooh, that's a
Pre-shot
lot of
stretch
stuff.
routine going to the first tee.
That is a lot of stuff. Best pre-stretch routine. Basically, a lot of the stuff that I like to do is just working on rotation and obviously flexibility through the areas that I already spoke about. We already talked about doing the kicks here. Another one that I like to do is just, again, I'll do a few of these, but I'm always going to be in motion. I'm never going to hold it. Ones that I do for the shoulders, and this is one, if you have any shoulder injuries, I'd be careful with. I'd use this end and not the club end. But there's certain things you can do to start loosening your shoulders this way. And if you notice, I have the club head on this way here. That's going to add more weight. If you're worried about that, then I would just use the other side. And obviously, the more you move this way, it's whatever's on this side, from opposite from your thumb, that's going to actually add the weight. So if you want a little more, you bring it lower. If you want more, you spin it around. That's for the shoulder. Rotational ones that I like to work on is one that I like to hold here. So they're not necessarily stretches. These are going to be a warm-up. I like to do this, and I just like to get used to keeping my head over my hands and getting that rotation towards the target. So I'll face you so you can see. And I try to get this way. And what I'm trying to do again is I'm just making sure that everything's going in a straight line. I'm not doing anything like that. So I get this motion and then I get it to the other side. While I'm doing that though, I'm trying to tighten here and tighten here so that I'm kind of tucking under a little bit. So if you see it from this angle, maybe you can see me kind of tucking under. so that I can feel my glutes and my abs engage. I like to do that. And then just the basic ones where I'm holding across here and I'm just trying to get that flow of moving through and getting loose. I don't do a whole lot of stuff there. I do a lot of stuff at home, such as foam rolling and things before I get there, just to really break up some of the fascia and get looser. I don't have a foam roller here, but again, we're going to be giving you guys a bunch of that stuff. And I think most of that,
can get that stuff again.
most of that stuff is right there already on the winter or the off-season course that we did.
Yeah, scratchgolfacademy.com. There's a whole off-season training course. 3 of the modules are with Anthony: injury prevention, how to create more speed, and just general things that relate to swing faults that
and we have a full warm-up,
issues.
if I do recall, that I did in
yes,
that as well.
It's
an
a very
full
extensive
warm-up on the
off-season
range,
course at Scratch Golf Academy.
full workouts. We have the whole thing there as well. But those are some of the simple ones that I like to do, other than, you know, going out and doing some swings. There's practice swings that I do too, step change, changing direction, just so you can work on your sequencing as well, that I like to do for warming up.
Great. Marvin.
Can you demonstrate tempo of a full swing versus tempo of a half swing?
Okay, good question. Tempo of a full swing versus tempo of a half swing. What you'll find is, now we're not talking up around the green here, 5-10 yards off the green, putting. We're talking, whatever, 50, 60 yards all the way out, depending on how strong a player you are. And it's a free app, Scratch Golf Academy app. In the tools section, the little cross clubs, we were talking about putting tempo trainer with someone earlier, or green reading trainer. There's a full swing tempo trainer, and it is terrific. There's a whole video on how to use it. You will really benefit. It's great before a round as well. Gets your mind off the swing, gets you going. The basic premise is that almost everyone they've tested, talking elite players, it takes 3 times the amount of time to arrive at the top that it takes to get back to impact. That's because there's dynamic acceleration in a big swing. And this tempo trainer at the app, the Scratch Golf, is terrific for that. You'll really enjoy it. It'll get you going. You can practice it at home. But here's one of the things, that shouldn't really change whether you're making a 3/4 swing or a full swing. So in other words, hey, if the swing's shorter, you're not going with quite the same overall speed, that same 3-to-1 cadence would still hold true. Check out the Scratch Golf Academy app. You'll love those training tools. Little crossed clubs down in the bottom right corner.
Great. And Robert's asking,
Robert.
The best tips for maintaining great balance through the swing.
Best tips for maintaining great balance through the swing. I'll say something. This is a balance expert, and then Anthony can go. I think it's a chicken and the egg thing. That is to say, certainly there could be flexibility and whatever, dynamic issues, but and certainly posture issues could come into play, but a lot of times this golf club, when it starts moving around you at 60, 80, 100 miles an hour, it affects your balance. And if that club's out of position and your subconscious is scrambling, trying to get the club in the right spot and square everything up, you can forget great balance. It's not going to happen. So the better your flow, the better your swing plane, the less compensations you're making, the easier it is to keep good balance.
A lot of it's just coordination and disassociation. Disassociation, being able to move your lower body from your upper body, helps a lot. I have a little drill. I'll show you guys a little drill, and this kind of helps with making sure everything stays linear. A lot of balance issues is like we were talking about this, or you're hanging back too much and you lose your balance backwards, or you dive at the ball so you lose your balance forwards.
Can I interject something here as Anthony's saying that? We were talking before the show, I've known this guy for years, and we were talking before the show about there's things called pressure mats, force plates, things like that in the world. You don't see them at every facility, but they've mapped out the way pressure moves between great players' feet throughout the swing. It's not identical in every player, but generally speaking, the best players, it's pretty uniform. It's in if you picture looking down on top of the feet, it's in a pretty straight track. You don't see it heel to toe. I had heard when I was much younger, it goes to the heel, then more to the toe, then back to the... That's not what it looks like on pressure mats. So great golfers move efficiently, but they move in a very confined, tight sort of line.
Yeah, if you're trying to get the quickest way to a destination, you're not going to loop your way there.
Right.
You know, you're trying to generate power in one direction. You look at someone that's trying to steal a base, they're not going to line up to steal a base this way and then take their leg and wing it all the way around like that. They're just going to actually push and go. So that's something to think about. But this is a little drill that helps with disassociation, and it's great for coordination. I like to, and it's also going to stop you from getting into an early extension, because if you do it, you're going to hit yourself in the knee, and you won't do it twice. I promise, it won't feel good. But I like to hold it out to the side like this, and I move my hips, and I make sure that my hips stay ahead of it the entire time. So if I'm going this way and then my hip moves, I know I'm really getting way too handsy, and I'm letting my torso get ahead. So it's a great disassociation drill. But if one thing you watch, now you're just learning coordination also for a left-handed swing. I wouldn't say you take your takeaway that way. We're just working on coordination, being able to drive your hips ahead of it. But if you watch it from down target line, you'll see that I'm staying very linear with my hips the entire time. There's none of this happening. And you'll notice that that is the easiest way for me to generate the coordination for this movement. And when you can get that, you're always going to be in balance. At every point, I can lift my foot up and be in balance if I'm doing this drill and making sure that my hips stay ahead of it. I really don't have any issues with balance, because I'm perfectly balanced throughout my body. Where the pressure goes to this, it's in the heel. When it goes to this side, it's here and on the heel. So that you basically have a perfect line at all times.
I have a question for Anthony. The late, great Sam Snead, who I was very fortunate to get to talk to a couple of times, was pretty interesting. He, one of the best balanced players of all time, one of the most gifted athletes, but he used to, when he was struggling, because he grew up playing in bare feet a bit, he would practice a bit with his shoes off, either in his socks or bare feet. He just felt he could feel his balance points in the ground better. Do you think there's some merit to that? Maybe at home, swinging in your socks?
100%. Well, I would say barefoot.
Barefoot.
Get out of the socks.
Okay.
Because you have so many nerves in the bottom of your feet. I mean, you can look at reflexology if
So
you guys really want to.
something?
Yeah, if you look at reflexology in general, they talk about how certain parts of your feet affect all the different organs of your body. So anytime you're getting any sensory barefoot, take the chance to do that.
Interesting. Okay.
When I'm training people and I really want to work on balance, we don't have our shoes on. We take our shoes off, and I want to feel them grip the floor. And it also helps if you have plantar fasciitis to actually get out of your shoes and your socks and actually start to feel the ground. Another thing to think about with balance as well is your toes should be able to move just like your fingers. So if you can't put your feet flat and raise your big toe like this without your other toes and spread them, and then raise all your little toes without your big toe, you're gonna have issues with balance anyway. So when you have your shoes off and you're just watching TV, start trying to grip things, try to grip the carpet, or a towel on a tile floor or whatever, and start working the bottom of your feet. You'll be surprised how much that'll also help back pain, flexibility, so many things throughout your body, because of the amount of nerves that are in your feet.
I learned a thing that wives may not appreciate this show, because guys are going to be using the mirrors, practice swings at home, feet up, shoes off at all times, socks off, but your golf games will get better. Interesting thing, I remember with Sam Snead, the first time I got to talk to him, I was introduced to him or whatever, and I'm over at the driving range. It's kind of windy, and he's hitting these shots to a pitching green that's 50 yards away. His eyesight was bad. He was a lot older. So he hits a shot, beautiful shot, right on line. And he said to me, because I'm younger than him, where did it land? How close is it? And I said, it was right on line. It was well short, probably 40 feet short. Next two shots, boom, right by the hole. It was impressive. Just pretty impressive. Of course, you don't usually win 82 times on tour if you're not a little bit elite. What do we got, Gary? Jay Harrison.
Talk about release. Do you rotate your forearms, or is it more of a throw release, like the last one?
Sure, you rotate your forearms, or is it more of a throw release? Honestly, people feel it a little bit differently, but at high speed, you are not going to get the kind of release and the kind of snap and the rotation, let's assume the grip and a few other things, that you should have by just trying to manufacture it and work on it that way. There has to be some load and some transfer of energy to do that. Now, Mike Malaska, great teacher out west. I don't know him personally, but I'm pretty familiar with his stuff. One of his things is, it's much more in this area. He's talking about rotating the arms back towards the body. I don't think he's talking, so I'm not saying he's not talking about it, but the stuff I've heard him say is less to do with the release right there. It's more getting you set up to get into the ball the right way up here. So yeah, you've got to feel some pop to do it correctly. I don't think at full speed you can manufacture it.
When you caddy drag the takeaway, it feels like your arms and wrists can lift the club faster.
Okay, so I think the question is, when you get a little bit of the old lag, the old Bobby Jones look off the off the club, can you then load it and lag it a little bit more? I would say yes, to a large extent. I mean, hey, the more you lag it there, the more you can do it here. The question is some relative level of control. I think overarching statement, there's a handful of things you could say, certainly a decent grip and stuff, but I think if there's one thing that is most common among golfers that is different to maybe the best players, and that is I don't think the club reacts enough to the body throughout the swing for most golfers. And you could add that to the takeaway. Most golfers, they take the club back. That is why literally 90% of people get the club behind them, because the club's too active for them. You watch great golfers, they're not rigid, but as they move, the club hasn't done nearly as much versus what they're doing. And you're right, hey, you don't have to lag it to death, but if that thing's reacting to you here, it is a lot easier to set up the right sort of pattern coming down. So I'm going to agree with you there. Big fan of Bobby Jones myself, of course, that look. Of course, he's playing with a hickory stick and no glove, so it's a little bit different.
Frank is asking.
Frank.
He's recovering from a partial tear in the tendon of his right bicep by the elbow.
Frank, partial tear right bicep by the elbow?
Yeah.
This is the expert.
Once he is cleared to play, what exercises or stretches should he do to prevent further injury?
Well, what you shouldn't do is do anything where your arm is back this way. That puts tremendous stress on the bicep tendon. If you are familiar with the sport highlight, where they have a big Cessna on their hand and they throw, every single one of them have a torn bicep. So you want to stay away from anything where your shoulder is in extension and you're doing anything this way. Things that you can do to strengthen the bicep that are usually the safest, I'll use this band. There's a lot of stuff that they would use in therapy. You can use a band like this. And you got to realize that the bicep tendons, the bicep itself, you see people doing this all the time. Yes, it's working the bicep brachii here, but underneath your brachialis is a lot more of the muscle that's being worked. The biceps are actually used for supinating your hands, so turning them this way. So as you can see, just by me doing this, you'll see it flex, right? So one of the main things that we've done, I had problems with the bicep tendon here. I don't know if you feel the pain here right underneath your brachioradialis, but I feel a lot of my pain there in the past. And what I did was a drill this way. I would put a band over my hand like this. I actually used a TheraBand, not one of these Slastics. But then I would just work on putting the band over my thumb and rotating my palm to the sky and holding it in this position and just really slow. A lot of time under tension exercises and not that quick motion like this are the ones that are going to give more time to the tendon to heal, because you're keeping it in tension so it'll get more blood flow to it. So if you're just yanking it long and short, you're just, you're really pulling at it. So you want to try to blood pull in a sense. And by doing this really slow, and staying in a very slow motion and then really trying to get your hand to turn open as much as you can, you're really going to peak out the bicep muscle a little bit more without putting a heavy load on it. You'll actually get more blood flow, because obviously blood is what's going to heal it. That's what's bringing all your nutrients. That's what's going to heal. So just taking a band this way, I don't know if you can see, holding it similar to this. I got to stand back on it again. So you just stand on it on one side and you just turn this way. And you kind of work that as more of a rehab type move, and you'll see that it's really going to work the tendons in there. It's just one that I used myself.
Good stuff.
And it worked really well.
So you're saying that in 1799, when George Washington was treated by his doctors and they bled off 7 pints of blood, that was not a good treatment.
No, that's what carries everything to heal it. So
that led to his demise, by the way. The great man. We're sorry to hear about it.
Let's go one step further. Rotator cuff.
Rotator cuff.
Surgery after a rotator cuff surgery.
I mostly teach down here in South Florida. We have a lot of senior golfers here. You treat them a lot of rotator
So the rotator cuff, it's a structure. It is not one muscle. So you have subscapularis that runs across the front, but it's called subscapularis because it hooks to the sub side of your scapula. So it actually starts out here and runs like kind of through your armpit and hooks to the underside of your scapula, your shoulder blade. You have a supraspinatus that runs on the top part of your scapula or your shoulder blade and runs out to here. And that's the one that most people end up hurting, because as you age, usually, if this is your shoulder joint, your acromion process is this knotty protrusion out here on the end. and that will sometimes degenerate lower this way. And what will happen is every time you raise your arm, you start grinding against that. Then you'll end up with a fraying of that. And then you have an infraspinatus behind there, and then teres minor comes in even below that. So it depends on the muscle that was ripped and repaired. Usually,
how many muscles are within the rotator cuff?
There's 4.
Okay.
Yeah, we have an acronym called SITS: subscapularis, infraspinatus, teres minor, and supraspinatus. So there's 4 that make up the rotator cuff itself. But it depends on which one, and they're all wide muscles like this that go out to a really short one, and that's how they attach. So they're like a blanket. So if they have fraying or a hole in it, the blanket still works. It just, you might get a cold spot. So it's not like the muscle's not going to work anymore, but you'll have some impingements, usually in this area is where people have the pain. You want to start working a lot of times with something under your arm this way and working some external rotation, things this way. So you're not having to like hold it there the whole time. So you can start to work things this way. You can then pull this way. Anytime you're pulling this way, you're working the subscapularis. Anytime you're going this way, you're working more so infraspinatus and teres minor. Anytime you're kind of going this way at a low level, that's when the supraspinatus up top becomes involved. So it honestly really depends on which muscle it was. A test for like supraspinatus is they have you turn your hand this way and pressure, and if you feel pain, a lot of times that's it, and same out this way. So it really depends on the muscle, on what you would do, because there's going to, depending on which one it is, there's different things that you
Something
can do
I've heard you say a couple of times in the last 20 minutes, though, is with some of these rehab things, slower, more...
Yeah, just controlled holds. A lot of isometric holds, they're going to have you do. A lot of isometrics is just going to bring blood to the area. It's always about blood. Massage. You get a massage. What is it really doing? It's bringing blood to the area. Cupping. What is it doing? It's bringing blood to the area. So a lot of it's bringing blood to the area. So isometric holds are usually pretty good. If you can just hold a weight out there without pain, figure out which way it doesn't hurt, you're going to get blood in the area. But you do want to move through range of motion. So there are controlled, articular movements, as well that you can do, but it really depends on the muscle. So it's hard for me to say if I don't know the exact muscle that was repaired.
Okay.
All right.
A lot of times, though, I want to get into this, you can actually start to fix your shoulders. If you have any rounding in your upper back, anytime I move my shoulder, I'm trying to take it into a range of motion that somebody that doesn't have rounding can reach back here. That's a lot of issue on your shoulder. So I would say spend some time on your thoracic spine and getting more extension. Because if you worked at a desk and you're like this, I can guarantee you're probably going to end up with the shoulder, especially right arm if you're a right-handed golfer, or you're going to get some bicep tendonitis from rolling in that shoulder joint over and over again.
Excessive restriction.
Because you're rounded here. So a lot of shoulder issues are caused because of the rounding. So if you can get this area back and start to work and get all this back this way, you can guys even try that. You can roll your shoulders forward and try to move your shoulders. It's not going to feel good. But when I'm extended this way, it's very easy and it frees it up. So it's something to think about. It was the supraspinatus. It's so tricky. But it's a lot of times they're going to make you do lateral movements this way and then forward movements. And then you have to find, using bands, you have to kind of find which one is not going to hurt. But a lot of times when they've repaired it, you're just trying to get it back to this, because you'll see people that have that tear, they'll do this, or they'll use their trap to help lift. You want the easiest way, like I said, if I'm rounded, I've moved that bony protrusion forward, and now when I raise my arm, I'm going to dig into it more. So anytime you're doing anything, try to get into extension as you're doing any motion this way or any motion this way. It's going to help if you can get everything back. So a lot of times I put people on a foam roller with their rear end at one end and their head at the other, and they're lying on their back on the foam roller so that it pushes that extension into their thoracic spine.
Up here, right?
Yeah, going long ways. So it'd be here to here. And what it does is it opens your chest up so you're in this position. So anytime you're doing any of those exercises, so once you're in that position on the foam roller, taking your arms through any kind of articulation or just moving this way can tend to help, but keep the shoulder blades really squeezed tight. But being on that foam roller helps that. So squeeze the shoulder blades tight and move through motion very slow with no weight is a very good way to just get started. Obviously, trying not to be in pain. There's going to be mild discomfort always in any rehab situation.
As there is in any swing change.
Yeah, right.
Good question here.
Okay.
Robert. How do you know when the backswing is over?
How do you know when the backswing is over? Well, I would say, as a principle, the farther you can move, assuming you're swing playing a few things, the farther you can move your hands and club away from where you started, the more potential energy you're going to have. If I was trying to break something on the ground, the farther I move my hands, the more speed I can create doing it. So that's the good thing. What you see, or where the point of no return is, or the point of lack of returns, once you start to significantly break down your radius or collapse your hands.
Or reverse.
Exactly, and or start to lose your support in your spine, those things are all going to cost you as much as you're going to gain. It's hard to hit the ball solid. So basically, what Anthony was just saying, if your spine remains pretty much vertical going back as viewed from there, and the space between you and the club remains, between you and your thumbs, let's say, remains pretty good. If you're hoisting it up this way, hey, longer is better for sure. And I think one other little comment on that, a lot of people, when their backswing gets a bit short and doesn't really wind up much power, instinctively they know they're not going to hit the ball very far. They jump at the ball too much trying to create speed. So it helps your rhythm if you give yourself time to stretch out and get a little bit longer.
A big test that I do to see how far someone can even take the club back in general, or how far they should, is always that wall test.
That's
you
a
would
good test.
you would kind of squat down, put your body against
Nice
the
and
wall,
flat on the
and you
wall.
make sure that your lumbar is touching. It can't be arched. If it's arched, you're shortening that lat. If you can touch the wall, no problem, with a perfectly locked out arms like this, take that long backswing.
Yeah.
But if you're only getting with your lower back touching at all times and your head touching the wall, and you're only getting to here, and you try to take a big backswing,
You'll break
you're
down.
lifting up, you're losing stability in the ground. Something bad is going to happen, especially when you start that downswing. So how far you can take it back? I mean, if you can touch the wall, no problem, by all means.
I can do that pretty easily.
Yeah, I can't. I'm a meathead.
I think one other little adjunct to that, he's got more muscles than I do. One other adjunct to that as well, even if you've got pretty good body flexibility that way, if you're still a little bit tight through the triceps, a little bit of bend in that lead arm is acceptable as long as there's reasonable space. A guy like Tom Watson's a bit more like that. You're not going to get the Ernie Els look if you're tight through the lats like that. So a teeny bit of give there is acceptable to some extent.
Can you clarify if this is B-PIF?
B-PIF.
Can you clarify if iron and wood swings are different? What the are the major?
Are iron and wood swings different? What's the major difference? Round numbers, no, they're the same. I mean, okay, there's some differences accounted to by the length of the club, which fractionally affects posture and where the thing is. But basically, your body and your arms are trying to do the same thing. You're trying to cock your wrists the same way. Any real differences probably between, say, a driver and an 8-iron would be more seen from here. And it's more trying to change where the bottom of the swing is. So by playing the ball a bit more forward and tilting a little bit more up here through the ball. But those are subtleties. They're not the major thing. I think probably if you had someone that, if there wasn't such a thing as a driver and Adam Scott was introduced to it and told you got to hit up on it more, put the ball forward, I bet within 10 swings he'd be hitting his driver well. He's just that good at swinging. So my vote is they're much more the same than different. That's the good news. You've got 13, putter aside, you've got 13 clubs in your bag probably. You've only got one swing to learn. It's just a lifetime of work to get good at it. That's the bad news. Is that fair to say?
Right.
But you've only got one to learn.
So back for the person that said that they were getting a bad habit of hitting the ball with the iron.
Yeah, bad habit hitting it with the irons.
Hitting it off the toe.
Hitting it off the toe. Okay, we've got some videos on that at both YouTube and at Scratch Golf there. Generally speaking, when I see people hit it off the toe, generally they get a little bit too steep coming down too vertically, and they're athletic enough to sort of recover from it. They get taller, the club gets shorter as their arms get taller, and they hit a lot of toe shots like that. Now, it's possible to swipe way across it and catch one on the toe. It's equally possible to hit it on the heel doing that, but that's usually what I see. What are some of the things you see hitting it off the toe?
A lot of times they're bending over too much, or they're too high, or it's a posture thing. Usually,
usually you're getting taller, the hands are getting
it's
taller.
The early
the club's
extension is
shorter.
what's going to cause you to get taller.
And if it's not physical, many times I say it's the golfer reacting to the club's too steep and they're fighting to get in position. I'll tell you something. If you look at, not everyone's built to do this. You look at Sergio or Ben Hogan or Nick Price that's got the club really flat. They have the lowest hands and body of anybody through the shot. Goes back to something I was saying earlier, steeps and shallows. If this thing's coming really shallow, really brushing, you can really afford to stay over it. If this thing's coming steeply, you better get up a little bit or you're going to have some problems. So check to see if you're not too steep. When you film yourself, I want you to look. Not everybody can have the same shaft angle through impact as at address, but it should be reasonably similar, and especially your body angle through the ball should look very similar. So if that's not happening, you know, you're probably off plane.
Yeah, I like to have them draw a line behind the rear end on the down
Yeah,
target.
that would be a good one
Try
there.
to
So you can
keep
see
it
if
on
that's
there.
in place
Make
there a
sure
little
that
bit.
you're not extending and getting a little too tall through impact and losing some of that distance.
Robert's asking, why can you flush a 4 hybrid but cannot put a 4 iron?
Robert, 4 hybrid is your favorite or a good one for you, 4 iron, not so much. Well, I mean, let's face it, the reason hybrids have become popular, they're just easier to hit. And even the tour players, most of them carry at least one hybrid now. Why is that a little bit easier to hit than an iron? A couple of reasons maybe. It's a much bigger head. It's not a huge head, but it's a lot bigger than an iron that's thin. So an iron, if you look at the top of it, so right there, it's very thin. The hybrid is obviously more out here. So it has a flatter, bigger bottom you can graze off. The other thing that happens with these clubs, when the club head is bigger back here, I'm drawing something that would be more of a driver size, they can move the center of gravity away from the face a little bit more, and that stabilizes it on off-center hits. When the center of gravity is a fraction behind the club head and you hit it off-center, it twists more. So they're more forgiving just by the nature of the golf club and the way it's designed. The downside is it's a little bit harder to manipulate the ball and to do some of the tricks great players do with a wood. You will never see a great player hitting a 9 wood. They'll be hitting a, whatever, 7, 8 iron or something. So they're just easier. That's why people use them.
Do you recommend a systematic approach for dialing in wedges from 80 yards in?
Systematic approach for dialing in wedges 80 yards in. Job 1 is always solid contact, reasonably consistently, and a decent trajectory. And by the way, I think you'll find most great golfers, if you stood behind them with a sand wedge from 70 yards, which is well less than a full one, you'd be surprised how low they would flight that ball. I'm not saying it would be low, it wouldn't be ballooning up in the air. They compress the ball, they spin it, and they hit it forward. Until such time as you can take your sand wedge or gap wedge and hit a dozen balls, 10 of the 11 are pretty solid, and the ones that are solid are about the same height, dialing in distances is very, very elusive for you. So I would concentrate first on a good trajectory, a lower trajectory, consistent contact, then you can start to dial your shots in. Some people prefer the old Dave Pell's approach, 3 clubs, 3 different length swings, so you've got 9 different, the most anal among us like these systems with clock faces and all these things. Some players at the other end of the spectrum, like a Seve Ballesteros, we were joking about something with Seve earlier, they much prefer feel and doing it all with one club, some players in between. So there's no exact system. But if you have solid contact, good trajectory control, you'll be good either way.
Can you go into small details about how the left hip and right femur work together in the downswing?
Left hip, right femur in the downswing. This would be the guy for the job right here.
Left hip and right femur work together.
I know what the left hip and the right femur
Yeah, I know,
are,
but you want to know how they work together in the downswing. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Left hip and right femur work together in the downswing.
How they work together in the downswing. I mean, basically all you're looking at with that one is, if you're looking at they said the left hip, right femur, how they're working in the downswing, how they work together. Basically the hip is just clearing and the femur's going to try to take some of that space. I mean, I usually tell people to watch how this knee would almost go to where their trail knee will go to where their lead knee was. So that way your lead hip is clearing while this femur is almost taking its place, or the other hip. So a lot of times if you're looking at pocket to pocket, this pocket is going to move out of the way so this pocket can get where it was. A lot of times I have people just hold a club in front of them so they can feel that motion so that you're not getting that way. If I hold my club right here and I move, I'm going to feel myself get in that position over and over again. But if I'm in this position and I'm doing that, or I'm extending it all, I'm going to hit the club. So you want to stay behind the club. And that's pretty much the relation that you're trying to get when you're doing it. But you also want to make sure when you're really working on that you're not sliding. Clear that lead hip and get it out of the way while you're doing it. So anything you can find that goes in front here is going to show you that perfect relation of how they're actually going to work together. It's just basically this side is trying to take over where this side was. And you have to clear this hip. Now, you'll have, maybe you don't have much internal rotation on the lead hip. That could do some impinging and not allow you to get there, which makes you slide. All that stuff is be figured out with an assessment with the TPI, TPI certified instructor.
One of the little drills my old boss, David Leadbetter, a famous coach, used to have, he'd get the wall behind someone like that, with or without a club, and assuming good lively posture, not sitting on the wall. Top of the backswing, back of the right glute would be touching it, but he liked, at least in the slow motion drills, as they would move down, the glutes would move along the wall a bit until both glutes would be touching before the right would leave, though. He wouldn't just flick the right glute away from that.
A little drill that I like to do that's very similar to that, I'll have someone stand against the wall. We'll pretend this is a baseboard, and you'll put your foot right up against the baseboard this way, and you'll put a chair behind you right here. And you'll basically set up in your golf posture, and you'll back up till like this with your hands on your rear until your hands touch. So you're roughly an inch off the wall.
Okay.
And we'll stand with your hands like this, and I want you to go to the backswing, feel it touch, and then as you go through, this thigh, not your hip, but the thigh will hit this wall in front of you at the same time your left rear end hits the wall behind you. And that'll usually put you in a perfect motion. And then right after that bump and that bump at the same time, then your hands will come in and hit the wall. And that's kind of a good little drill to make sure that you're getting your proper weight shift plus rotation.
That one's
and
actually,
not getting forward.
That was actually in the Scratch Golf Academy off-season series. We talked about this earlier. Anthony did 3 complete modules there. One is injury prevention, general training stuff. One is how to create more speed exercises for that. And one is common swing faults and what are often body issues associated with those. If you go to the scratchgolfacademy.com website, many of you may have been there because you got this notification. That particular drill is fleshed all the way out in, I think, the at-home practice one or the off-season practice. It's good. The whole thing's in the off-season category.
Is asking, how is the ball position determined between the different lengths of the club? Is there a general
ball position relative to different lengths of the club. I don't think it's the same for everybody. And then we'll give you some general ideas. Who's texting about who's on? B Piff. We've got a couple of questions from B Piff. That is to say, Dustin Johnson and a novice lady golfer don't tend to have the same release pattern. I know that's just kind of half joking. Not everybody does it the same. So you want the ball where you're able to hit the ball slightly before the bottom of the swing. Now, I'm not suggesting if a chronically bad impact, you have a radical ball position to do that. But generally speaking, your shorter, more lofted clubs, more or less in the middle. And if you're fairly athletic, your middle clubs, hybrids are somewhere maybe an inch or two forward of that. But you've got to do what you've got to do. Again, I mean, whatever works for you at the time is what you've got to do. And if you're not that dynamic and you release it a bit early, don't be playing the ball forward because you just won't hit it well. Drive is a little different animal because it's on a tee. But we'll say generally in the middle for most lofted clubs, a little bit of forward of middle for less lofted clubs. Does that sound fair? Do Dustin Johnson and a beginner novice player release it the same way? I don't think so.
No.
Let them know we're going to end the show in 3 minutes.
We're ending the show in 3 minutes. We appreciate you being part of this. Hope it's been somewhat fun and helpful for you.
3 questions that we're going to answer.
3 questions. Oregon Red. Robert.
Divine and
Ragmuff, Robert Divine, and Oregon Red.
Yep,
I'm not a big internet guy. Where do they get these names from?
Robert is asking, Anthony,
Robert.
referring to your pull exercises, do you have any of your favorites that you recommend? Pull exercises.
Well, if you can get to like an Olympic pull that has the flags, that's any pull exercises that can help with vertical jump basically, and explosiveness is what we're really looking for with those. One that I really like is if you have flags, but if you don't and you have a nice wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever, kids, that will come out and hold a noodle over the pool is nice, so you have something that you're getting up to. But if you don't, you're just going to get in about 3.5, maybe 4 foot of water. It really depends on your height, on what you want. But you're going to squat down to the water gets right at your chin level, and you're going to swing your arms and explode out of the water as high as you can go. Now, if you have replacements of any kind, I suggest you bring your knees up in the air a little bit after you've started your descent.
If you've had joint replacements.
If you've had joint replacements. If you haven't, land back down, squat back down to that level, go again, do about 20 of those. But if you've had joint replacements, I would say lift up a little bit so you're about to get your chin to the water, and then set your feet back down so you don't get the pounding. I like that one. And then I just do jumping and pulling my knees out of the water in that same level. I'll do 20 forward, 20 backwards,
How high would the
20
water
to
be
the
that
side.
you could get your knees out of the water?
Well, you're trying to get them out of the water. I can, but for you, just try to get them up towards your chest.
Okay.
So no, I'm just teasing. You're trying to get them up to your chest. So it's basically bringing your knees to your chest like a tuck jump, and you're trying to do the Welch basically that way. You want to do tuck jumps in the water, as many as you can. Not as many as you can, but 20 forward, 20 back, 20 to the right, 20 to the left. And those are just real quick ones. There's some other stuff in the water, but that's a real quick
Interesting.
thing that you
Great
can do.
stuff. Love it.
The water's adding resistance, and it's also slowing down that pounding. So.
Did you touch on any putter stuff? Because I asked.
Just one time we talked about consistency. Yeah.
And then reading the green, I think.
So
Yeah.
release versus flip.
Release versus flip.
Can't stop snap hooking. When I was a 7 handicap, had not been able to get it off the tee, battling caution, ball position, and club face awareness.
Okay, so this guy's, who's asking the question again?
Oregon Red.
Oregon Red. He's flipping it. He's hitting a lot of hooks. Is that what we're hearing? But typically those problems are much more snap hooking it. Much more of a problem that's associated with a low handicap player. And I think Oregon Red said he was a 7 not so long ago. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, hey, the club is heavy at high speed. And if you're stuck or you're out of position and you're not moving well and your hips are frozen, that I don't care how strong you are, you're going to flip it. So some of the things Anthony's been talking about, getting that nice linear weight transfer, getting your glutes to squeeze up, getting the right leg to sort of replace or get underneath your chin, and being engaged here is going to help. But one other thing that's probably a factor, if I go towards the camera, is a good chance as a lower handicap, you're swinging out to the right of the target line as a right-handed golfer, in to out too much. Your arms will be too far away from you then to control. I don't care what you do with your body. So you would want to feel that you hit some punch shots and the grip end of the club is closer in towards your left hip when you hold your finish. Your arms will feel more across your body. It is much easier to feel more of a cut release when you do that. So hit some little punch shots and see if you can finish right in here with your right arm across you and the handle closer to your left hip. See if you can change that shape a little bit. That should help. Most golfers, that's poison for them. They come over it too much to begin with. That's why they don't snap hook the ball. Final question here. What do we got?
That's it, guys.
That's it? Okay. Okay, listen, come on in there, Anthony. We appreciate it. We appreciate an opportunity to get out here with the team. Gary, the main man's over there, and hopefully share a few things with you that are helpful. That's why we, one of the things I like most about the game of golf, beautiful, it's outdoors, it's challenging, but you don't have to gather a whole team together. Anytime you want, at the house, in the basement, out at the range alone, you can play around with the variables and enjoy it, build skill. It can be frustrating, but it's a lot of fun. The more you put into it, the more you get out. And hopefully some of the ideas we have for you at least open your eyes maybe to a little bit better way of doing things.
Yeah, play, practice, discovery, learn.
That's
a lot
right.
of it's just coordination. Grab stuff, start doing new movements. Don't be afraid to look on YouTube, check out some of the stuff that we've done already, work on some different moves, and just discovery learn. I mean, it's the best thing. They always said, play a bunch of sports when you're a kid so that you're more aware of how your body moves.
I played a lot of football or soccer, as they call it here, when I was young in England, and I think it helps with balance and coordination, disassociation.
That's a huge thing, too, that we use for hip, is just it's just start going through motion and start to feel how your body feels in different positions and explore as much as possible.
And do some of it away from the golf course without the ball, where you can really feel things and do it.
Shoes
get
off.
Good at it. Shoes off, that's another one. Socks off as well. Okay, thanks guys and gals. We appreciate it.
Bodycrafters is going to be releasing some free courses.
Bodycrafters Inc., Bodycrafters, that's Anthony's business, is going to be releasing some really good free content. We'll put you in touch with that. Some fun stuff for you to play around with. Lots of free stuff at the YouTube Scratch Golf Academy channel. If I can put in a plug for scratchgolfacademy.com, what we've tried to build there is full sequential courses, full swing, driving, irons, strategy, putting, chipping, sand, practice, etc., fairway woods. So you can kind of go through things sequentially at your own speed, not get bogged down, but just progress and do it at your speed and cherry pick and kind of work through things in a systematic way. I know your stuff does that as well. So that's why it's out there. Hopefully it's helpful to you. We appreciate your support and involvement. As always,
take care.